Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the collaboration album between Courtney Patton and Jason Eady called Something Together. So yeah, I get the feeling that this one, it's my fault again in a big way. I mean, I could blame the collective country music press for dropping the ball here, and believe me, I do. But to some extent, if I was that invested in one of my favorite indie country acts putting out an album, I should have been on top of this earlier. Granted, this is also a prime example of what happens when the artist decides to drop a record early without warning and not having a huge fan base or network of someone like Run the Jewels or Beyonce, or how country music press hasn't really taken over the web in the same way that hip-hop has. But okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So if you've been watching my show since around early 2014, you might recognize the name Jason Eady, a Texas country artist who played the sort of relentlessly realistic, amazingly well-framed, powerfully written country music that would not have a chance in hell in the mainstream these days. And while he made his play to that crowd in 2012 with the softer album AM Country Heaven, his 2014 album Daylight and Dark, that pulled no punches. There was a purity to that album's grit and sound that still gets to me to this day, and as such it should be no surprise of outside of an album like, hey look, Run the Jewels, it would have been my top album of 2014. No jokes, it's that good and it definitely holds up. But if you remember that album at all, it also had a song with fellow singer-songwriter Courtney Patton called We Might Just Miss Each Other, featuring a pair of estranged lovers going to the same bar and trying gamely to avoid each other for plenty of understated and complicated reasons. Kind of ironic given that Courtney Patton is Jason Eady's wife. The two are a songwriting pair, and that's a powerhouse couple to be reckoned with, so I was very much eagerly anticipating their planned acoustic collaboration album Something Together, especially if they were primed to push their songwriting into some interesting places to play different roles. They themselves admitted they didn't want it to be too sappy or corny. The album was announced in October of 2016 to be released in early 2017, and then it leaked early on Courtney Patton's website, with physical copies now available this year. And from what I can tell, nobody really seemed to notice that this came out, because not only did I get no requests for it, even on the grapevine, but it seemed like practically nobody else online decided that they wanted to review this, including critics that I would otherwise expect to be on top of it. But okay, in indie country, that sometimes happens, and I might as well be first to the punch here, especially on YouTube, so how is Something Together? Well, okay. After several listens through, I can see why some people, even if the indie country set, if they knew this had come out, might have overlooked this project. For one, it's not all original songs. Most are acoustic re-recordings of previous songs from both artists, along with a couple of covers. And coupled with the very low-key release and the very intimate feel of the album, you get the impression that it's very much a personal side project between the two, a chance to reinterpret some established tracks as duets to add a little bit more different context or flavor. I say all this to temper a lot of expectations going in from Jason Eady or Courtney Patton fans. And yet, when I'm telling you that you need to get this anyway because it is excellent, is a testament to how well Courtney Patton and Jason Eady refined their respective sound and chemistry to something that's potent and captivating together. This really came together well. I enjoyed the hell out of this. So let's talk about that underlying chemistry first, because it's really the reason why this album has so much organic emotive power in the first place. This is not a Chris and Morgaine Stapleton situation where both artists are naturally belters or a little bit louder. While Courtney Patton might bring a little bit more aggressive presence to her songs, this album works entirely in subtlety, in the sort of lived-in relationship songs where vocal emotion and tension is balanced out with the writing, not overpowering it or overcompensating for it. And that balance is so damn potent that it's almost to the point where I wish that the record's production and writing had fed into it more, especially in the vocal balance or the volume between the two singers. Now, as you might expect, many of these songs are presented where one artist takes the lead with the other contributing background vocals. But you know what? I get the impression that an alternative arrangement with a slightly fuller contribution from both artists could have made for more interesting context, especially lyrically if it was done right. Granted, that's kind of what happens when you adapt songs that aren't quite meant to be duets in the first place, like the opening song Judgment Day, which strips the song down to campfire blues territory, but doesn't really do a lot with the vocal interplay in comparison with the balance on, say, the excellent Lonesome Down and Out, or or Man on a Mountain, or especially Where I've Been or Cry Pretty, which are just both fantastic songs and balance each other very well. Now, sometimes you wish that Courtney Patton and Jason Eady shared a little bit more in the lead duties on the same song, like on the relationship fable So This Is Life, or maybe 12 Days if the vocal arrangement was set up right, but then you got the straight breakup song Twisted, where I'm not entirely sure it clicks because this is really a Courtney Patton song all the way through. It might have been better done solo, especially when we get to the bridge. Now, granted, I'm nitpicking about that because I'm otherwise finding a lot of these arrangements incredibly powerful in their own right in a subtle sort of way. As I said, the setup here is pretty sparse. Acoustic guitars, maybe hints of sandy or jingling percussion, but what Jason Eady and Courtney Patton do is keep that warm fidelity of tone that comes in the guitar and match it in the vocal pickup, something that wasn't always present on Courtney Patton's last album on songs like So This Is Life for 12 Days. But on the flip side, you also get cases where the guitar arrangement has slightly shifted since the original, like the addition of a key change and opening up minor chords of Lonesome Down and Out that I really liked. It adds a darkness to that song that I argue improves it considerably. And that song was off of Daylight and Dark. There wasn't a lot of room for improvements. But what I absolutely love about this setup is that intimacy. It doesn't feel forced, but by stripping back to plain acoustics but not polishing the fidelity to a sheen, it lends the album a closeness that makes these stories hit all the more harder, feel all the more personal. Even songs like Man on a Mountain or Better Moving On Home or Welcome Table have a little bit more of a traditional rollick to them on the fact that most of them are covers. But if I want to single out a composition that really grabbed me, it was the words to my favorite memory, especially instrumentation. It's written by Courtney Patton, it follows Jason Eady's cover of the Merle Haggard song My Favorite Memory, and it's not hard not to see this as the follow-up song, even utilizing similar elements of composition in the chord structure for a really potent 2-for-1. And to explain why it works so well beyond that, we need to talk about the songwriting. And look, the way that the production is set up, it's very clear that Courtney Patton and Jason Eady were looking to place the most focus on the songwriting here, and especially with the original songs, they really did stick the landing. The writing is brisk and succinct but emotionally intelligent from the both of them, with Courtney Patton bringing a little bit more detail but perhaps a shade less refinement in the cadence and flow. And yet, if you were expecting this duets album to be full of love songs, well, okay, outside of Love Song, which I'd argue is the least interesting and weakest song here, the album goes into some mature and impressively complex relationship drama, with the instrumental framing and the intimacy placing almost uncomfortably close in these very real situations. The spiraling mess of both partners on Lonesome Down and Out, the acknowledgement of a dead relationship that they just need to end on the original Suffering Fools, how Courtney Patton's subtle additions to the hook add another layer of lingering, heartbroken balance to Cry Pretty that I really loved, encapsulates what I've always loved about the writing, such a startling frankness of the emotional dynamic that's both too mature and yet too exhausted and worn down to be anything but straightforward. It what makes the bitter directness of Twisted work, or the small scope of the family story on So This Is Life feel so real, where the perfect American family comes apart in their hands. And even the brighter touches of Man on a Mountain, where if they can't find the compromise, it's just not gonna work. They're that blunt and honest, and I really appreciate that. But outside of Cry Pretty, which remains a very clear album standout here, this cover and version of it, there are two other songs that deserve a lot of attention. The first being, as I said, Words to My Favorite Memory, where in the middle of listening to that Merle Haggard song, Courtney Patton gets a song that her husband had died. And it's a very simple but heartbreaking statement of how music, and especially a song about memories, can become entirely too real to revisit. And then there's Where I've Been, where the framing paints the spark having long died, and thus she's striking out to find satisfaction outside of the marriage. And yet, if he was willing to try, they could have something. She's leaving the option open, but that would require effort that she's not sure is really there from him anymore. It's a heartbreaking and yet powerfully realistic song, and considering the delivery, I can't imagine how difficult it might be to write and sing opposite your husband on this song or your wife on this song and make it seem believable. Not just a testament to the writing, but the performance as well. It really did grip me there. So okay, as a whole, what do I find on Something Together? Well, I could say that I wish the vocal arrangements were a little bit more diverse and balanced within the individual songs, or that we got more originals, because with the exception of Love Song, they just knocked those out of the park. But really, those are minor gripes, and are indicative of wanting more instead of actual flaws of the material here. For what Courtney Patton and Jason Eady were trying to execute in terms of themes and strip back intimacy, I'd argue they pulled it off masterfully, and the courage to go into broken relationship territory and perform them so well, genuinely stunning. I'm gonna say it. Even the lesser cuts, I'm not entirely while about any of the covers, even though the Merle Haggard one definitely belongs in the album, but they're still damn good songs executed really well, which leaves me giving this a very strong 8 out of 10 and a huge recommendation, especially if you're an indie country fan. Folks, far too many people will have slept on this release. Fix that, because this album is definitely worth your time and highlights the start to 2017 that is just getting stronger. I hope to see more because this was excellent. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I know I'm late getting to it, but I got the poll up here, so all of you guys who actually heard of it, then you can tell me your ratings. I'm actually curious where Courtney Patton and Jason Eady fans fall on this. I got a link down in the description below if you guys want to buy the album. I'm trying to do that a little bit more often, draw a little bit more support to the artist. But beyond that, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right here, where 3 times a week you guys can vote on my schedule, and once a week on Saturdays, the people in the higher Patreon levels can add albums to my schedule. But beyond that, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.